In the late 20th century, Wichita, Kansas carries a quiet fear that does not fade. A series of murders stretches back decades. The killer calls himself BTK. The letters stand for bind, torture, kill. The crimes begin in 1974 and continue for years. Victims are bound inside their own homes. Many are strangled. The attacks appear planned and controlled. Investigators know they are dealing with a patient offender. The first known victims are members of the Otero family. 4 people are killed inside their house. The brutality shocks the city. Police search for suspects, but the evidence is limited. The offender leaves few traces. In the months that follow, letters arrive at local media offices. The writer describes the crimes in disturbing detail. He demands attention. He signs his messages with the name BTK. Investigators realize the killer wants recognition. The letters are deliberate. They describe the crimes with precision. The author claims responsibility for several murders. He writes about control and fantasy. Detectives collect every letter. They study the language. They compare handwriting samples. Still, the killer remains unidentified. Years pass. The murders continue. Victims include women living alone and families inside ordinary neighborhoods. The crimes occur without warning. Police increase patrols. Community meetings take place across Wichita. Residents lock their doors earlier. Parents warn their children about strangers. Still, the offender avoids capture. The investigation grows into one of the largest in Kansas history. Detectives review thousands of tips. Suspects come and go. Some people confess falsely. Others are cleared by evidence. The case grows colder with time. By the early 1990s, many investigators believe the killer may have died or left the area. Then the letters stop. For a long time, the silence creates uncertainty. Some detectives think the offender has ended his crimes. Others believe he still watches the investigation from a distance. The files remain open. Evidence stays in storage. Every few years, new detectives review the case. In 2004, something changes. A letter arrives at a local newspaper. It references one of the early murders. The writer includes details known only to investigators. The letter carries the same tone as the messages from decades earlier. Detectives quickly realize the author is the same person. The BTK killer has returned. The communication includes puzzles and clues. Some appear designed to test investigators. Others ask questions about technology. The writer wants to know whether police can trace computer files stored on floppy disks. Investigators recognize the message as both arrogance and curiosity. The return of the letters reopens the entire investigation. Evidence from the 1970s is reviewed again. DNA technology has improved since the original crimes. Detectives examine old samples for new results. At the same time, they analyze every message sent by the killer. The letters show a need for control. They also reveal a need for recognition. Investigators believe the writer wants to be known, but only on his own terms. He enjoys the attention. The messages often reference news coverage and police statements. A task force studies the language carefully. Experts examine writing patterns. They identify repeated phrases and spelling habits. These details may help narrow the search. At the same time, investigators watch the mail carefully. They trace postmarks and delivery routes. One package contains a floppy disk. Detectives see an opportunity. Digital files often contain hidden information. Computer specialists analyze the disk using forensic tools. The data reveals a surprising detail. The file was last edited by someone connected to a church in Wichita. Investigators quietly examine the church records. One name stands out. The individual works in a position of trust. He lives nearby. He appears ordinary. But his background includes technical knowledge and long-term ties to the community. The name is Dennis Rader. Rader lives in Park City, a suburb of Wichita. He works as a compliance officer for the local government. His job involves enforcing city regulations. Neighbors describe him as strict but polite. He attends church regularly. He is also a husband and father. Detectives begin a careful review of his history. They compare timelines from the BTK crimes with Rader's life events. Several details align. Addresses and work schedules place him near crime scenes. His background includes military service and technical training. Investigators proceed cautiously. They collect a sample of DNA from Rader's daughter through medical records. The sample is compared with evidence recovered from a BTK crime scene. The result indicates a strong family connection. The evidence is enough to move forward. In February 2005, officers stop Dennis Rader while he drives near his home. He is taken into custody without resistance. News spreads quickly across Wichita. Residents learn that the man suspected of terrorizing the city for decades is someone who lived among them. At the police station, detectives begin questioning. Rader sits calmly at the table. The room is quiet. He does not appear nervous. His posture remains steady. Investigators observe his expressions carefully. Many suspects show signs of stress during questioning. Rader does not. At one point during the interrogation, he smiles. Detectives notice the moment immediately. The expression is brief but clear. It appears when investigators reference the letters sent to media outlets. The smile suggests recognition. It also suggests pride. The investigators remain controlled. They continue asking direct questions. Rader answers in a steady voice. He speaks about details that only the killer would know. His tone remains detached. He describes events with little visible emotion. The interrogation reveals something else. Rader enjoys explaining how he avoided detection. He describes surveillance methods and planning techniques. Detectives listen carefully. They allow him to continue speaking. Years of investigation have finally reached this moment. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. Rader continues to speak in a calm voice. Investigators take notes and record every statement. The interview becomes one of the most detailed confessions in American criminal history. It also exposes how the killer hides behind an ordinary life for decades. Detectives watch closely for small reactions. The smile they noticed earlier remains important. It suggests the suspect believes he controls the narrative. Investigators understand this pattern. Some offenders talk more when they feel recognized. The questioning continues. He begins describing specific crimes. The information matches evidence collected years earlier. Locations, times, and methods align with case files. The connection becomes impossible to deny. For investigators who spent years chasing the BTK Killer, the moment confirms what they suspected. The man sitting in front of them is responsible for the murders that haunted Wichita for decades. The calm smile remains one of the most disturbing details. It reflects a person who separates his crimes from the ordinary life he presents to the world. For detectives, the observation reinforces their understanding of the suspect's mindset. Control and recognition have always been central to the BTK case. Dennis Rader now sits in a small interview room inside the Wichita Police Department. The room is quiet. Detectives continue asking questions in a measured tone. The investigation has reached a point where the evidence already connects him to the BTK case. The purpose of the interrogation is no longer discovery. It is confirmation. Rader speaks in a steady voice. His posture remains upright. He answers questions without hesitation. Investigators document every word. Each statement is compared with crime scene records collected over 3 decades. The conversation focuses on the earliest murders. Rader begins describing the events of January 1974. The victims are members of the Otero family. Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, and their children Joseph Jr. and Josephine are killed inside their Wichita home. Rader explains how he enters the house and restrains the family. The description matches details known only to investigators. Detectives remain silent as he speaks. The tone of the room stays controlled. No one interrupts unnecessarily. The goal is to allow the suspect to continue providing verifiable information. Rader explains how he studies his victims before the attacks. He calls them projects. The word appears in several of the letters sent to newspapers years earlier. Investigators recognize the same language in his confession. He describes surveillance. He watches homes from a distance. He learns routines. He chooses victims based on opportunity and isolation. These patterns match the investigative profiles created during the early years of the case. The interrogation continues for hours. Detectives move through each known murder connected to the BTK investigation. They ask for confirmation of locations and methods. Rader answers directly. The statements align with the physical evidence stored in police archives. One case involves Catherine Bright. She is attacked in 1974. Bright survives the initial assault but later dies from her injuries. Rader describes entering the house and confronting the victims. His account matches the forensic record from the scene. Another case involves Shirley Vian in 1977. Rader explains how he gains entry into the home while her children are present. The crime scene evidence collected decades earlier supports the timeline he provides. The pattern repeats across multiple cases. Investigators remain careful not to introduce information that could influence his answers. Instead, they ask neutral questions. They allow Rader to describe the details himself. This approach ensures the statements remain credible in court. During the interrogation, Rader occasionally pauses. He appears to reflect before continuing. Detectives observe these pauses closely. They note the difference between memory recall and hesitation. The earlier smile appears again at certain moments. When investigators mention the letters sent to newspapers and television stations, Rader acknowledges them directly. He explains how he chooses the name BTK. The words represent his method of control. Bind, torture, kill. He describes the communication as part of the process. The letters allow him to claim responsibility. They also allow him to watch the reaction from law enforcement and the public. Detectives recognize the significance of these admissions. For decades, the letters remain one of the strongest pieces of evidence linking the crimes together. The same language patterns appear repeatedly in the messages. Now the suspect confirms authorship during a recorded interrogation. The interview shifts toward the years of silence. Investigators ask why the letters stopped during the 1990s. Rader explains that personal responsibilities limit his time. He refers to family and employment obligations. The explanation reveals how he manages two separate identities for many years. On the outside, he works ordinary jobs and attends church. Inside the investigation files, he remains the unidentified BTK killer. Detectives listen carefully. They avoid emotional reactions. Their role is to document the confession with precision. The questioning then moves to the events that lead to his arrest. Investigators ask about the floppy disk sent to the media in 2005. Rader confirms he sends the disk himself. He believes the data cannot be traced back to him. He trusts earlier communication suggesting that police cannot track the file. Digital forensic analysis proves otherwise. When the disk is examined, investigators recover metadata connected to a computer used at Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita. Rader serves as president of the church council at the time. The information becomes a key investigative lead. Detectives present the evidence carefully during the interview. Rader acknowledges the connection. He explains that he uses the church computer to create the file before mailing it to the media. The statement confirms the digital evidence recovered during the investigation. This moment demonstrates how modern forensic methods can solve cases that remain unsolved for decades. The interrogation continues into the evening. Detectives move methodically through each crime associated with the BTK investigation. The suspect confirms responsibility for 10 murders between 1974 and 1991. Each description aligns with investigative records collected across multiple jurisdictions. For the detectives present in the room, the moment carries professional significance. Many of them grow up hearing about the BTK murders. Some join law enforcement after the crimes have already stopped. Now they sit across from the man responsible. The atmosphere remains restrained. No one raises their voice. The process follows standard investigative procedure. Every answer is documented. Every detail is compared with the case files. The earlier observation still stands out. The suspect smiles when discussing certain parts of the investigation. Detectives recognize the expression as part of the offender's behavior pattern. Control and recognition remain central themes in the BTK case. Investigators understand that some offenders seek acknowledgement for their actions. During the interrogation, the suspect appears to respond to that recognition. By the end of the interview, the evidence is overwhelming. The confession includes details only the killer could know. The physical evidence supports the statements. DNA analysis links family members to biological samples recovered from earlier crime scenes. The investigation that begins more than 30 years earlier now reaches a clear conclusion. Dennis Rader is formally charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. The legal process now moves to court. The arrest ends one of the longest homicide investigations in Kansas history. It also demonstrates how patient investigative work, combined with modern forensic technology, can resolve cases that appear unsolvable. But the story does not end with the confession. The legal proceedings begin in early 2005. Dennis Rader faces multiple counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors prepare a case built on decades of evidence, combined with the detailed confession from the police interrogation. Every crime scene file is reviewed. Forensic reports, photographs, and witness statements are organized chronologically. The goal is to present a coherent narrative that demonstrates Rader's responsibility for each murder. The prosecution relies heavily on the confession. Investigators record the statements in full, preserving the context and details. Every fact mentioned by Rader is cross-checked with historical evidence. Locations, times, and methods align with the crime scene reports. The corroboration between confession and physical evidence strengthens the case significantly. During pretrial hearings, Rader remains calm. He does not display anger or distress. Court officials note his composed demeanor. The demeanor observed during interrogation carries into the courtroom. This behavior becomes a focal point for both the prosecution and defense. The defense raises concerns about the mental state of the suspect but does not dispute the accuracy of the confession. Victim families attend the hearings. They follow each procedural step carefully. The process emphasizes the American justice system's commitment to due process, even in cases of high public interest. Judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys maintain formal, professional conduct. The focus remains on establishing facts rather than emotion. Experts testify about forensic analysis and crime scene reconstruction. DNA evidence, preserved from decades-old cases, connects Rader to multiple victims. Investigators describe the role of digital evidence in confirming his identity, including the metadata from the floppy disk sent to the media. Forensic linguists analyze the BTK letters and identify writing patterns matching Rader's speech and written statements. Psychological evaluations are presented. Experts explain Rader's methodical behavior and the need for control. The evaluations highlight that the suspect compartmentalized his public life and criminal activity. His ability to appear normal within his community and family contrasts with the severity of his crimes. These findings are presented factually, without speculation or exaggeration. The trial proceeds efficiently. Each count of murder is addressed individually. Witnesses testify to the investigative work, including the tracing of digital evidence and the long-term review of case files. The prosecution emphasizes the pattern of behavior over time, showing the methodical nature of the crimes and Rader's calculated approach. Rader himself provides limited statements. He does not attempt to mislead the court. His prior confession already contains comprehensive detail. Judges and prosecutors review the interview transcripts extensively. The statements allow the legal process to proceed without question of authorship. The trial moves toward sentencing. Given the number of murders and the premeditated nature of the crimes, prosecutors recommend multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The defense does not dispute this recommendation. The court evaluates the evidence, the confession, and the corroborating forensic records. Rader is formally sentenced in August 2005. He receives 10 consecutive life sentences without parole. The court emphasizes the severity of the crimes while upholding procedural standards. Families of victims receive official statements and acknowledgement of the investigative work that led to resolution. The case closes formally in the legal system, but its impact endures. The BTK investigation demonstrates the capabilities of patient law enforcement, forensic science, and procedural diligence. Decades-old evidence is re-examined with modern technology, enabling justice despite the time elapsed. Investigators reflect on the years spent pursuing the killer. The arrest, interrogation, and trial illustrate the importance of methodical work, attention to detail, and adherence to established procedures. The BTK case becomes a reference for future investigations of serial offenders who evade capture for extended periods. The resolution also highlights lessons for the criminal justice system. Accurate documentation, preservation of evidence, and measured interrogation techniques allow for successful prosecution even in complex, long-running cases. It illustrates the necessity of coordination among local, state, and federal agencies when investigating serial crimes. Detectives and prosecutors involved in the case emphasize professional conduct. The interrogation and trial demonstrate restraint, focus, and commitment to objective fact-finding. The calm demeanor of the suspect contrasts sharply with the rigor of investigative procedures. This contrast reinforces the role of evidence over emotion in determining accountability. The community responds to the resolution with a measured sense of closure. While the crimes themselves remain distressing, the legal process confirms accountability. Public communications focus on factual information, investigation methods, and the outcomes of the judicial system. The BTK case continues to be studied in law enforcement training programs. Investigators analyze the steps taken from initial crime reports to the confession and trial. Emphasis is placed on methodical case review, interdisciplinary cooperation, and the use of technology in reopening cold cases. Dennis Rader begins his sentence at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. He is assigned a standard maximum security housing unit. The prison system follows strict protocols for inmates convicted of multiple murders. Daily routines include scheduled meals, recreation, and restricted movement. Security measures ensure the safety of both staff and other inmates. Rader maintains a calm and compliant demeanor. He follows facility rules and avoids confrontation. Correctional officers note his methodical behavior and attention to protocol. Despite his crimes, he adapts to the structured environment. Interaction with other inmates is minimal. The routines of prison life replace the dual identity he maintained outside. His case becomes a subject of study within corrections and criminal justice programs. Officials review behavioral patterns exhibited during the long investigation and trial. Rader's ability to compartmentalize his life before incarceration is discussed in training modules for law enforcement and corrections officers. The focus remains on understanding offender psychology in a factual, clinical manner. Rader is assigned limited privileges consistent with his classification. He participates in scheduled educational programs. Correspondence with approved parties is monitored. Visits and communication follow established security protocols. His life inside the facility is regulated and predictable, a sharp contrast to the years he spent eluding capture. The prison administration observes his conduct for potential risks. Rader does not display signs of aggression toward staff or inmates. His behavior demonstrates compliance with institutional expectations. The correctional system applies consistent disciplinary measures for any infractions, though none significant are noted during his incarceration. Documentation of his activities is maintained in official records. These include behavioral logs, disciplinary reports, and routine medical assessments. The detailed documentation allows for ongoing monitoring and ensures accountability within the facility. The broader implications of the BTK case continue to influence law enforcement. Cold case units examine the techniques used to identify Rader after decades. Investigators review the role of digital forensics, handwriting analysis, and investigative persistence. The lessons inform training and policy development in serial offender investigations. Families of the victims receive updates through legal and administrative channels. While the events cannot be undone, official communication ensures transparency in the prison system and the judicial outcomes. The focus remains factual, detailing processes and procedures rather than emotional narratives. The BTK case also contributes to public understanding of procedural law enforcement. Media coverage emphasizes factual reporting of investigative methods, confessions, and court outcomes. Reporting avoids sensationalism, instead highlighting the sequence of investigation, arrest, and prosecution. Rader's incarceration underscores the effectiveness of forensic advances and persistent law enforcement efforts. Investigators and correctional officials review each stage of the process, noting how patience, adherence to protocol, and methodical documentation result in accountability for even the most elusive offenders. The case reinforces the principle that crimes committed decades earlier can be resolved through careful evidence collection, technological application, and professional investigative work. The outcome demonstrates the reliability of the criminal justice system in processing and sentencing offenders under complex circumstances. Inside the correctional facility, Rader lives under constant supervision. His daily routines continue without incident. Programs and privileges are maintained according to institutional rules. The environment emphasizes security, order, and accountability. The structure contrasts with the control he previously exercised outside. The BTK case remains a reference point for criminal justice professionals, corrections officers, and law enforcement trainers. Analysts study patterns of behavior, methods of evasion, and investigative breakthroughs. Each element of the investigation and prosecution provides instruction in managing complex, long-term cases. Ultimately, the investigation, interrogation, trial, and incarceration of Dennis Rader illustrate the long-term consequences of violent crime. It also demonstrates the systematic operation of the American justice and prison systems. The emphasis on fact-based investigation, adherence to procedure, and objective documentation ensures accountability even for crimes committed over many years. The story concludes with acknowledgement of the procedures that brought resolution. Investigators, legal professionals, and correctional staff all contribute to ensuring the system functions as intended. The resolution provides closure through documented accountability rather than emotion or spectacle. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.